Well, hello there, lovely internet void. Tis HR.
Hello there, lovely internet.
We're
void.
back to draw some more
Tis HR.
stuff.
Hello there, lovely internet.
We're
void.
back to draw some
Tis
more
HR.
Hold,
Hello
please.
We're back to draw.
Let's pause. Let's shut off the other audio. There we go. And as usual, Kitty heard me talking to myself and became concerned for my well-being. So she is over here. Are you coming over here? What are you doing? We can't start the stream until Laura lets us. What? What's up? Okay. There you go. Come on if you're coming on. But anyway, tis HR. Back for another drawing adventure. One of these days. What? What? Now there's gonna be a fight. No. Ugh. No fighting on my lap. Hey! Alright, Proxy beat Laura to my lap because Laura was sitting there stalling. And Laura got a little mad about that in case you didn't hear. Proxy is going to try and go to sleep now. I don't even know if you can see him. What are you doing, little dude? There really is a cat here. What are you doing, little dude? Oh no, don't eat my hair. Are you comfy? Are you good now? Are you all set? Say hi to the people. Hi to the people. Okay. There we go. No more fighting, please. No. There's not really room over here, man. No, there's not really room over here. I know. Roxy wants my entire stream to be me just snuggling him. I can't. I can't snuggle you. You can lay down next to me, though. You can lay down on that chair. Yeah. No. No. See, I gotta do stuff. Ow. He's appeared on stream a lot more than that, but that's how many he's appeared on stream since I started the counter. And now that he's gotten on my lap, he's going to keep trying to get on my lap for like 5 minutes straight. He's just gonna sit here trying to get on my lap. Anyway, let's come over here. We're gonna continue. Ow. We're gonna continue. Maybe. We're gonna continue a digital painting adventure. And we're going to continue Thomas Paine's Age of Reason finally. I don't know why LibriVox was down on Monday, but it's come back up now, so we're going to continue that while I do my little painting. Let me go ahead and get that set up. Don't need this. We're literally on the last chapter of part 1, and then we're going to be starting part 2. So part 1 that we listened to before, I believe he wrote in 1794. And then the second part he wrote in 1795, and the last part he wrote in 1807. So we're going to listen to the last part of, or section 15, the last section of the first part.
Part 1, Section 15 of The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. In every point of view in which those things called miracles can be placed and considered, the reality of them is improbable and their existence unnecessary. They would not, as before observed, answer any useful purpose, even if they were true. For it is more difficult to obtain belief to a miracle than to a principle evidently moral without any miracle. Moral principle speaks universally for itself. Miracle could be but a thing of the moment, and seen but by a few. After this it requires a transfer of faith from God to man.
Hey, Brad. We're doing something a little different. I'm trying to work in an acrylic painting style in Procreate. I started this on Monday, and LibriVox was down on Monday, so we're also working on finishing Age of Reason. And we had a different kitty start the stream. And also, thank you. I got your card and stuff. Thank you very much for that. I'm not going to be sending out cards this year. I've just got a lot of other stuff going on. And I don't know if you were here since stuff has changed, but I'm a little spastic and weird, and even like pronouncing things weird, because I've got some medication changes happening and I'm trying to adjust. So, yeah. Welcome. Thank you. Good to see you. And hope you're doing well.
To believe a miracle upon man's report. Instead, therefore, of admitting the recitals of miracles as evidence of any system of religion being true, they ought to be considered as symptoms of its being fabulous. It is necessary to the full and upright character of truth that it rejects the crutch, and it is consistent with the character of fable to seek the aid that truth rejects. Thus much for mystery and miracle. As mystery and miracle took charge of the past and the present, prophecy took charge of the future and rounded the tenses of faith. It was not sufficient to know what had been done, but what would be done. The supposed prophet was the supposed historian of times to come, and if he happened, in shooting with a long bow of 1,000 years, to strike within 1,000 miles of a mark, the ingenuity of posterity would make it point blank, and if he happened to be directly wrong, it was only to suppose, as in the case of Jonah and Nineveh, that God had repented himself and changed his mind. What a fool do fabulous systems make of man! It has been shown in a former part of this work that the original meaning of the words prophet and prophesying has been changed, and that a prophet in the sense of the word as now used, is a creature of modern invention, and it is owing to this change in the meaning of the words that the flights and metaphors of the Jewish poets and phrases and expressions now rendered obscure by our not being acquainted with the local circumstances to which they applied at the time they were used, have been erected into prophecies and made to bend to explanations at the will and whimsical conceits of sectaries, expounders, and commentators. Everything unintelligible was prophetical, and everything insignificant was typical. A blunder would have served for a prophecy, and a dishclout for a type. If by a prophet we are to suppose a man to whom the Almighty communicated some event that would take place in the future, either there were such men or there were not. If there were, it is consistent to believe that the event so communicated would be told in terms that could be understood, and not related in such a loose and obscure manner as to be out of the comprehension of those that heard it, and so equivocal as to fit almost any circumstance that might happen afterwards. It is conceiving very irreverently of the Almighty to suppose he would deal in this jesting manner with mankind. Yet all the things called prophecies in the book called the Bible come under this description. But it is with prophecy as it is with miracle. It could not answer the purpose even if it were real. Those to whom a prophecy should be told could not tell whether the man prophesied or lied, or whether it had been revealed to him, or whether he conceited it. And if the thing that he prophesied or intended to prophesy should happen, or something like it, among the multitude of things that are daily happening, nobody could again know whether he foreknew it or guessed at it, or whether it was accidental. A prophet, therefore, is a character useless and unnecessary, and the safe side of the case is to guard against being imposed upon by not giving credit to such relations. Upon the whole, mystery, miracle, and prophecy are appendages that belong to fabulous and not to true religion. They are the means by which so many "lo here's" and "lo there's" have been spread about the world, and religion been made into a trade. The success of one impostor gave encouragement to another, and the quieting salvo of doing some good by keeping up a pious fraud protected them from remorse. Having now extended the subject to a greater length than I first intended, I shall bring it to a close by abstracting a summary from the whole. First, that the idea or belief of a word of God existing in print, or in writing, or in speech, is inconsistent in itself for reasons already assigned. These reasons, among many others, are the want of an universal language, the mutability of language, the errors to which translations are subject, the possibility of totally suppressing such a word, the probability of altering it or of fabricating the whole and imposing it upon the world. Secondly, that the creation we behold is the real and ever-existing Word of God, in which we cannot be deceived. It proclaims his power, it demonstrates his wisdom, it manifests his goodness and beneficence. Thirdly, that the moral duty of man consists in imitating the moral goodness and beneficence of God manifested in the creation towards all his creatures. That seeing as we daily do the goodness of God to all men, it is an example calling upon all men to practice the same towards each other, and consequently that everything of persecution and revenge between man, and everything of cruelty to animals, is a violation of moral duty. I trouble not myself about the manner of future existence. I content myself with believing, even to positive conviction, that the power that gave me existence is able to continue it in any form and manner he pleases, either with or without his body. And it appears more probable to me that I shall continue to exist hereafter than that I should have had existence, as I now have, before that existence began. It is certain that, in one point, all nations of the earth and all religions agree. All believe in a God. The things in which they disagree are the redundancies annexed to that belief. And therefore, if ever an universal religion should prevail, it will not be believing any new thing, but in getting rid of redundancies and believing as man believed at first. Adam, if ever there was such a man, was created a deist. But in the meantime, let every man follow, as he has a right to do, the religion and the worship he prefers. End of the first part.
All right, so we're going to move on to the second part. So everything in that first part, like I said, was written in 1794. So the second part he wrote in 1795. I don't know if it was in reaction to reactions, or if he just had more thoughts. So we'll see.
Preface of Part 2 of The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Age of Reason, Part the Second, being an investigation of true and fabulous theology, by Thomas Paine, London, printed and published by R. Carlyle, 55 Fleet Street, 1819. Preface. I have mentioned in the former part of The Age of Reason that it had long been my intention to publish my thoughts upon religion, but that I had originally reserved it to a later period in life, intending it to be the last work I should undertake. The circumstances, however, which existed in France in the latter end of the year 1793 determined me to delay it no longer. The just and humane principles of the Revolution, which philosophy had first diffused, had been departed from. The idea, always dangerous to society, as it is derogatory to the Almighty, that priests should forgive sins, though it seemed to exist no longer, had blunted the feelings of humanity, and callously prepared men for the commission of all manner of crimes. The intolerant spirit of church persecutions had transferred itself into politics. The tribunal, styled revolutionary, supplied the place of an inquisition, and the guillotine and the stake outdid the fire and faggot of the church. I saw many of my most intimate friends destroyed, others daily carried to prison, and I had reason to believe, and had also intimations given me, that the same danger was approaching myself. Under these disadvantages, I began the former part of The Age of Reason. I had, besides, neither Bible nor Testament to refer to, though I was writing against both, nor could I procure any. Notwithstanding which, I have produced a work that no Bible believer, though writing at his ease, and with a library of church books about him, can refute. Toward the latter end of December of that year, a motion was made and carried to exclude foreigners from the convention. There were but 2 in it, Anacharsis Cloots and myself, and I saw I was particularly pointed at by Bourdon de Loisy in his speech on that motion. Conceiving, after this, that I had but a few days of liberty, I sat down and brought the work to a close as speedily as possible, and I had not finished it more than 6 hours, in the state it has since appeared, before a guard came there about 3 in the morning, with an order signed by the 2 committees of public safety and surety general for putting me in arrestation as a foreigner, and conveyed me to the prison of the Luxembourg. I contrived, in my way there, to call upon Joel Barlow, and I put the manuscript of the work into his hands, as more safe than in my possession in prison, and not knowing what might be the fate in France, either of the writer or the work, I addressed it to the protection of the citizens of the United States. It is with justice that I say that the guard who executed this order and the interpreter of the committee of general surety who accompanied them to examine my papers treated me not only with civility but with respect. The keeper of the Luxembourg, Benoit, a man of a good heart, showed to me every friendship in his power, as did also all his family, while he continued in that station. He was removed from it, put into arrestation, and carried before the tribunal upon a malignant accusation, but acquitted. After I had been in the Luxembourg about 3 weeks, the Americans, then in Paris, went in a body to the convention to reclaim me as their countryman and friend, but were answered by the president, Vader, who was also president of the Committee of Surety General, and had signed the order for my arrestation, that I was born in England. I heard no more after this from any person out of the walls of the prison till the fall of the Robespierre on the 9th of Thermidor, 27 July, 1794. About 2 months before this event I was seized with a fever, that in its progress had every symptom of becoming mortal, and from the effects of which I am not recovered. It was then that I remembered with renewed satisfaction and congratulated myself most sincerely on having written the former part of The Age of Reason. I had then but little expectation of surviving, and those about me had less. I know, therefore, by experience, the conscientious trial of my own principles. I was then with 3 chamber comrades, Joseph Van Hoel of Bruges, Charles Bastieni, and Michael Robbins of Louvain. The unceasing and anxious attention of these 3 friends to me by night and by day I remember with gratitude and mention with pleasure. It happened that a physician, Dr. Graham, and a surgeon, Mr. Bond, part of the suite of General O'Hara, were then in the Luxembourg. I ask not myself whether it be convenient to them, as men under the English government, that I express to them my thanks, but I should reproach myself if I did not, and also to the physician of the Luxembourg, Dr. Markowski. I have some reason to believe, because I cannot discover any other cause, that this illness preserved me in existence. Among the papers of Robespierre that were examined and reported upon to the convention by a committee of deputies is a note in the handwriting of Robespierre in the following words: "Demand that Thomas Paine be decreed of accusation for the interest of America as well as of France." From what cause it was that the intention was not put in execution, I know not, and cannot inform myself, and therefore I ascribe it to impossibility on account of that illness. The convention, to repair as much as lay in their power the injustice I had sustained, invited me publicly and unanimously to return into the convention, and which I accepted, to show I could bear an injury without permitting it to injure my principles or my disposition. It was not because right principles have been violated that they are to be abandoned. I have seen, since I have been at liberty, several publications written, some in America and some in England, as answers to the former part of the Age of Reason. If the authors of these can amuse themselves by doing so, I shall not interrupt them. They may write against the work and against me as much as they please. They do me more service than they intend, and I can have no objection that they write on. They will find, however, by this second part, without being written as an answer to them, that they must return to their work and spin their cobweb over again. The first is brushed away by accident. They will now find that I have furnished myself with a Bible and Testament, and I can say also that I have found them to be much worse books than I had conceived. If I have erred in anything in the former part of the Age of Reason, it has been by speaking better of some parts of those books than they deserved. I observe that all my opponents resort, more or less, to what they call Scripture evidence and Bible authority to help them out. They are so little masters of the subject as to confound a dispute about authenticity with a dispute about doctrines. I will, however, put them right, that if they should be disposed to write any more, they may know how to begin. October 1795. Thomas Paine. End of Preface.
All right, so we're going to move on to the first real chapter of the second part. Let's see what interesting stuff Paine has in store for us today. Also, I can't play my desktop audio and my microphone at the same time. Just in case you're wondering, that's why I'm typing. I don't have a setup where it doesn't reverberate weird, so let's see if Paine talks about aliens like last time.
Part 2, Section 1 of The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Age of Reason, Part the Second. It has often been said that anything may be proved from the Bible, but before anything can be admitted as proved by the Bible itself must be proved to be true. For if the Bible is not true, or the truth of it be doubtful, it ceases to have authority, and cannot be admitted as proof of anything. It has been the practice of all Christian commentators on the Bible, and of all Christian priests and preachers, to impose the Bible on a world as a mass of truth, and as the Word of God. They have disputed and wrangled, and have anathematized each other about the supposable meaning of particular parts and passages therein. One has said and insisted that such a passage meant such a thing, another that it meant directly the contrary, and a third that it meant neither one nor the other, but something different from both. And this they call understanding the Bible. It has happened that all the answers which I have seen to the former part of the Age of Reason have been written by priests, and those pious men, like their predecessors, contend and wrangle, and pretend to understand the Bible. Each understands it differently, but each understands it best, and they have agreed in nothing but in telling their readers that Thomas Paine understands it not. Now, instead of wasting their time and heating themselves in fractious disputations about doctrinal points drawn from the Bible, these men ought to know, and if they do not, it is civility to inform them that the first thing to be understood is, whether there is sufficient authority for believing the Bible to be the Word of God, or whether there is not. There are matters in that book, said to be done by the express command of God, that are as shocking to humanity and to every idea we have of moral justice as anything done by Robespierre, by Carrier, by Joseph Le Bon in France, by the English government in the East Indies, or by any other assassin in modern times. When we read in the books ascribed to Moses, Joshua, etc., that they, the Israelites, came by stealth upon whole nations of people, who, as the history itself shows, had given them no offense, that they put all those nations to the sword, that they spared neither age nor infancy, that they utterly destroyed men, women, and children, and they left not a soul to breathe. Expressions that are repeated over and over again in those books, and that too with exulting ferocity. Are we sure these things are facts? Are we sure that the Creator of man commissioned these things to be done? Are we sure that the books that tell us so were written by his authority? It is not the antiquity of a tale that is any evidence of its truth. On the contrary, it is a symptom of its being fabulous. For the more ancient any history pretends to be, the more it has the resemblance of a fable. The origin of every nation is buried in fabulous tradition, and that of the Jews is as much to be suspected as any other. To charge the commission of acts upon the Almighty, which in their own nature and by every rule of moral justice are crimes, as all assassination is, and more especially the assassination of infants, is matter of serious concern. The Bible tells us that those assassinations were done by the express command of God. To believe, therefore, the Bible to be true, we must unbelieve all our belief in the moral justice of God. For wherein could crying or smiling infants offend? And to read the Bible without horror, we must undo everything that is tender, sympathizing, and benevolent in the heart of man. Speaking for myself, if I had no other evidence that the Bible is fabulous than the sacrifice I must make to believe it to be true, that alone would be sufficient to determine my choice. But in addition to all the moral evidence against the Bible, I will, in the progress of this work, produce such other evidence as even a priest cannot deny, to show from that evidence that the Bible is not entitled to credit as being the Word of God. But before I proceed to this examination, I will show wherein the Bible differs from all other ancient writings with respect to the nature of the evidence necessary to establish its authenticity. And this is the more proper to be done because the advocates of the Bible, in their answers to the former part of the Age of Reason, undertake to say that they put some stress thereon, that the authenticity of the Bible is as well established as that of any other ancient book, as if our belief of the one could become any rule for our belief of the other. I know, however, but of one ancient book that authoritatively challenges universal consent and belief, and that is Euclid's Elements of Geometry. And the reason is because it is a book of self-evident demonstration, entirely independent of its author, and of everything relating to time, place, and circumstance. The matters contained in that book would have the same authority they now have had they been written by any other person, or had the work been anonymous, or had the author never been known. For the identical certainty of who was the author makes no part of our belief of the matters contained in the book. But it is quite otherwise with respect to the books ascribed to Moses, to Joshua, to Samuel, etc. Those are books of testimony. They testify of things naturally incredible, and therefore the whole of our belief as to the authenticity of those books rests, in the first place, upon the certainty that they were written by Moses, Joshua, and Samuel. Secondly, upon the credit we give to their testimony. We may believe the first, that is, we may believe the certainty of the authorship and yet not the testimony, in the same manner that we may believe that a certain person gave evidence upon a case, and yet not believe the evidence that he gave. But if it should be found that the books ascribed to Moses, Joshua, and Samuel were not written by Moses, Joshua, and Samuel, every part of the authority and authenticity of those books is gone at once, for there can be no such thing as forged or invented testimony. Neither can there be anonymous testimony, more especially as to things naturally incredible, such as that of talking with God face to face, or that of the sun and moon standing still at the command of a man. The greatest part of the other ancient books are works of genius, of which kind are those ascribed to Homer, to Plato, to Aristotle, to Demosthenes, to Cicero, etc. Here again, the author is not an essential in the credit we give to any of those works, for as works of genius they would have the same merit they have now were they anonymous. Nobody believes the Trojan story, as related by Homer, to be true, for it is the poet only that is admired, and the merit of the poet will remain, though the story be fabulous. But if we disbelieve the matters related by the Bible authors, Moses, for instance, as we disbelieve the things related by Homer, there remains nothing of Moses in our estimation but an impostor. As to the ancient historians from Herodotus to Tacitus, we credit them as far as they relate probable and credible, and no further. For if we do, we must believe the two miracles which Tacitus relates were performed by Vespasian, that of curing a lame man and a blind man, in just the same manner as the same things are told of Jesus Christ by his historians. We must also believe the miracle cited by Josephus, that of the Sea of Pamphylia opening to let Alexander and his army pass, as is related of the Red Sea in Exodus. These miracles are quite as well authenticated as Bible miracles, and yet we do not believe them. Consequently, the degree of evidence necessary to establish our belief of things naturally incredible, whether in the Bible or elsewhere, is far greater than that which obtains our belief to natural and probable things, and therefore the advocates for the Bible have no claim to our belief of the Bible, because that we believe things stated in other ancient writings. Since we believe the things stated in these writings no further than they are probable and credible, or because they are self-evident, like Euclid, or admire them because they are elegant, like Homer, or approve them because they are sedate, like Plato, or judicious, like Aristotle. End of Part 2, Section 1.
So, just 1795, he wrote this. And again, some of the same arguments. Oh, man.
Part 2, Section 2 of The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Having premised these things, I proceed to examine the authenticity of the Bible, and I begin with what are called the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. My intention is to show that those books are spurious, and that Moses is not the author of them, and still further, that they were not written in the time of Moses, nor till several hundred years afterwards, that they are no other than an attempted history of the life of Moses, and at the times in which he is said to have lived, and also of the times prior thereto, written by some very ignorant and stupid pretenders to authorship several hundred years after the death of Moses, as men now write histories of things that happened, or are supposed to have happened, several hundred or several thousand years ago. The evidence that I shall produce in this case is from the books themselves, and I will confine myself to this evidence only. Were I to refer for proofs to any of the ancient authors, whom the advocates of the Bible call profane authors, they would controvert that authority as I controvert theirs. I will therefore meet them on their own ground, and oppose them with their own weapon, the Bible. In the first place, there is no affirmative evidence that Moses is the author of those books, and that he is the author is altogether an unfounded opinion, got abroad nobody knows how. The style and manner in which those books are written give no room to believe or even to suppose they were written by Moses, for it is altogether the style and manner of another person speaking of Moses. In Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, for everything in Genesis is prior to the times of Moses, and not the least allusion is made to him therein. The whole, I say, of these books is in the third person. It is always, "The Lord said unto Moses," or "Moses said unto the Lord," or "Moses said unto the people," or "the people said unto Moses." And this is the style and manner that historians use in speaking of the person whose lives and actions they are writing. It may be said that a man may speak of himself in the third person, and therefore it may be supposed that Moses did. But supposition proves nothing, and if the advocates for the belief that Moses wrote those books himself have nothing better to advance than supposition, they might as well be silent. But granting the grammatical right, that Moses might speak of himself in the third person, because any man might speak of himself in that manner, it cannot be admitted as a fact in those books, that it is Moses who speaks, without rendering Moses truly ridiculous and absurd. For example, Numbers chapter 12, verse 3. "Now the man Moses was very meek, above all the men which were on the face of the earth." If Moses said this of himself, instead of being the meekest of men, he was one of the most vain and arrogant of coxcombs, and the advocates for those books may now take which side they please, for both sides are against them. If Moses was not the author, the books are without authority, and if he was the author, the author is without credit, because to boast of meekness is the reverse of meekness, and is a lie in sentiment. In Deuteronomy, the style and manner of writing marks more evidently than in the former books that Moses is not the writer. The manner here used is dramatical. The writer opens the subject by a short introductory discourse, and then introduces Moses as in the act of speaking. And when he has made Moses finish his harangue, he, the writer, resumes his own part, and speaks till he brings Moses forward again, and at last closes the scene with an account of the death, funeral, and character of Moses. This interchange of speakers occurs 4 times in this book, from the first verse of the first chapter to the end of the 5th verse. It is the writer who speaks. He then introduces Moses as in the act of making his harangue, and this continues to the end of the 40th verse of the 4th chapter. Here the writer drops Moses and speaks historically of what was done in consequence of what Moses, when living, is supposed to have said, and which the writer has dramatically rehearsed. The writer opens the subject again in the 1st verse of the 5th chapter, though it is only by saying that Moses called the people of Israel together. He then introduces Moses as before, and continues him, as in the act of speaking, to the end of the 26th chapter. He does the same thing at the beginning of the 27th chapter, and continues Moses, as in the act of speaking, to the end of the 28th chapter. At the 29th chapter, the writer speaks again through the whole of the 1st verse, and the 1st line of the 2nd verse, where he introduces Moses for the last time, and continues him, as in the act of speaking, to the end of the 33rd chapter. The writer, having now finished the rehearsal on the part of Moses, comes forward and speaks through the whole of the last chapter. He begins by telling the reader that Moses went up to the top of Pisgah, that he saw from thence the land which, the writer says, had been promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he, Moses, died there, in the land of Moab, but that no man knoweth of his sepulchre unto this day, that is, unto the time in which the writer lived, who wrote the book of Deuteronomy. The writer then tells us that Moses was 110 years of age when he died, that his eye was not dim, nor his natural force abated, and he concludes by saying that there arose not a prophet since in Israel like unto Moses, whom, says this anonymous writer, the Lord knew face to face. Having thus shown, as far as grammatical evidence applies, that Moses was not the writer of those books, I will, after making a few observations on the inconsistencies of the writer of the book of Deuteronomy, proceed to show, from the historical and chronological evidence contained in those books, that Moses was not, because he could not be, the writer of them, and consequently that there is no authority for believing that the inhuman and horrid butcheries of men, women, and children told of in those books were done, as those books say they were, at the command of God. It is a duty incumbent on every true deist that he vindicates the moral justice of God against the calumnies of the Bible. The writer of the book of Deuteronomy, whoever he was, for it is an anonymous work, is obscure, and also in contradiction with himself in the account he has given of Moses. After telling that Moses went to the top of Pisgah, and it does not appear from any account that he ever came down again, he tells us that Moses died there in the land of Moab, and that he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab. But as there is no antecedent to the pronoun he, there is no knowing who he was that did bury him. If the writer meant that he, that is, God, buried him, how should he, that is, the writer, know it? Or why should we, that is, the readers, believe him, since we know not who the writer was that tells us so? For certainly Moses could not himself tell where he was buried. The writer also tells us that no man knoweth where the sepulchre of Moses is unto this day, meaning the time in which this writer lived. How then should he know that Moses was buried in a valley in the land of Moab? For as the writer lived long after the time of Moses, as is evident from his using the expression of unto this day, meaning a great length of time after the death of Moses, he certainly was not at his funeral. And on the other hand, it is impossible that Moses himself could say that no man knoweth where the sepulchre is unto this day. To make Moses the speaker would be an improvement on the play of a child that hides himself and cries, "Nobody can find me." Nobody can find Moses. This writer has nowhere told us how he came by the speeches which he has put into the mouth of Moses to speak, and therefore we have a right to conclude that he either composed them himself or wrote them from oral tradition. One or other of these is the more probable, since he has given, in the 5th chapter, a table of commandments, in which that called the 4th commandment is different from the 4th commandment in the 20th chapter of Exodus. In that of Exodus, the reason given for keeping the 7th day is, "Because," says the commandment, "God made the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and rested on the 7th." But in that of Deuteronomy, the reason given is that it was the day on which the children of Israel came out of Egypt, and therefore, says this commandment, the Lord thy God commanded thee to keep the Sabbath day. This makes no mention of the creation, nor that of the coming out of Egypt. There are also many things given as laws of Moses in this book that are not to be found in any of the other books, among which is that inhuman and brutal law, chapter 21, verses 18, 19, 20, and 21, which authorizes parents, the father and the mother, to bring their own children to have them stoned to death, for what it is pleased to call stubbornness. The priests have always been fond of preaching up Deuteronomy, for Deuteronomy preaches up tithes, and it is from this book, chapter 25, verse 4, they have taken the phrase and applied it to tithing, that "thou shalt not muzzle the ox when he..."
Did y'all see that? I'm drinking cocoa, and it has marshmallows in it, and one of them came out and missed my mouth. That was just good old klutzery. One of you I know is gonna clip that. Yeah, that'll be a fun clip. HR misses her mouth. Oh my gosh. I think I'm gonna start adding some trees to this picture.
"He treadeth out the corn." And that this might not escape observation, they have noted it in the table of contents at the head of the chapter, though it is only a single verse of less than 2 lines. O priests, priests, ye are willing to be compared to an ox for the sake of tithes. Though it is impossible for us to know identically who the writer of Deuteronomy was, it is not difficult to discover him professionally, that he was some Jewish priest, who lived, as I shall show in the course of this work, at least 350 years after the time of Moses. I come now to speak of the historical and chronological evidence. The chronology that I shall use is the Bible chronology, for I mean not to go out of the Bible for evidence of anything, but to make the Bible itself prove historically and chronologically that Moses is not the author of the books ascribed to him. It is therefore proper that I inform the reader, such an one at least as may not have the opportunity of knowing it, that in the larger Bibles, and also in some smaller ones, there is a series of chronology printed in the margin of every page for the purpose of showing how long the historical matters stated in each passage happened, or are supposed to have happened, before Christ, and consequently the distance of time between one historical circumstance and another. End of Part 2, Section 2.
I just want to say, digital acrylic painting is a lot different than I would do regular acrylic painting, because with regular acrylic painting, I know how to control my brush. With these, I don't necessarily have as much control as I have with a brush. It's hard to get just the right thickness that I want with the pressure on here, as opposed to if I'm using a brush, I could angle it. It's just different. So a painting like this, I would finish in 2 or 3 hours if I was doing this with regular acrylic. But using digital, it's a little, I have to take extra steps. Like if I were doing this in real life, I would allow some overlay so that the colors could blend together more naturally, and I could let it dry to then paint on top of it, or dry it with a hair dryer to paint on top of it. But I have to make new layers and do different stuff, and there's just certain effects I don't know how to reproduce digitally yet. So anyway, that's just a side note. Also, continuing on with Age of Reason, yeah, that's a lot of arguments we still make today, that some of the books written supposedly by Moses can't have been written by Moses, or perhaps they were an oral tradition that was written down. But yeah, there's a lot of grammatical issues with the translation of translations of translations, which was probably a giant game of telephone in the oral traditions before that. Anyway, I'm going to start this tree. I'm probably going to take a break in a second to get a new drink. Hopefully more marshmallows don't fall out of my face. And hopefully I'll learn how to use cups. This new technology of cups. Well, let's go on.
Part 2, Section 3 of The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. I begin with the book of Genesis. In the 14th chapter of Genesis, the writer gives an account of Lot being taken prisoner in a battle between the 4 kings against 5, and carried off, and that when the account of Lot being taken came to Abraham, he armed all his household and marched to rescue Lot from the captors, and that he pursued them unto Dan. Verse 14. To show in what manner this expression of pursuing them unto Dan applies to the case in question, I will refer to two circumstances, the one in America, the other in France. The city now called New York in America was originally New Amsterdam, and the town in France, lately called Havre Marat, was before called Havre de Grace. New Amsterdam was changed to New York in the year 1664, Havre de Grace to Havre Marat in the year 1793. Should, therefore, any writing be found, though without date, in which the name of New York should be mentioned, it would be certain evidence that such a writing could not have been written before, and must have been written after New Amsterdam was changed to New York, and consequently not till after the year 1664, or at least during the course of that year. And in like manner, any dateless writing, with the name of Havre Marat, would be certain evidence that such a writing must have been written after Havre de Grace became Havre Marat, and consequently not till after the year 1793, or at least during the course of that year. I now come to the application of those cases, and to show that there was no such place as Dan till many years after the death of Moses, and consequently that Moses could not be the writer of the book of Genesis, where this account of pursuing them unto Dan is given. The place that is called Dan in the Bible was originally a town of the Gentiles, called Laish, and when the tribe of Dan seized upon this town, they changed its name to Dan, in commemoration of Dan, who was the father of that tribe, and the great-grandson of Abraham. To establish this in proof, it is necessary to refer from Genesis to the 18th chapter of the book called the Book of Judges. It is there said, verse 27, that they, the Danites, came unto Laish, to a people that were quiet and secure, and they smote them with the edge of the sword. The Bible is filled with murder. And burned the city with fire, and they built a city, verse 28, and dwelt therein, and they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their father, howbeit the name of the city of Laish at the first. This account of the Danites taking possession of Laish and changing it to Dan is placed in the book of Judges immediately after the death of Samson. The death of Samson is said to have happened 1120 years before Christ, and that of Moses 1451 before Christ, and therefore, according to the historical arrangement, the place was not called Dan till 331 years after the death of Moses. There is a striking confusion between the historical and the chronological arrangement in the book of Judges. The last 5 chapters, as they stand in the book, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21, are put chronologically before all the preceding chapters. They are made to be 28 years before the 16th chapter, 266 before the 15th, 245 before the 13th, 195 before the 9th, 90 before the 4th, and 15 years before the 1st chapter. This shows the uncertain and fabulous state of the Bible. According to the chronological arrangement, the taking of Laish and giving it the name of Dan is made to be 20 years after the death of Joshua, who was the successor of Moses, and by the historical order as it stands in the book, it is made to be 306 years after the death of Joshua, and 331 after that of Moses. But they both exclude Moses from being the writer of Genesis, because, according to either of the statements, no such place as Dan existed in the time of Moses, and therefore the writer of Genesis must have been some person who lived after the town of Laish had the name of Dan, and who that person was, nobody knows. And consequently, the book of Genesis is anonymous and without authority. I proceed now to state another point of historical and chronological evidence, and to show therefrom, as in the preceding case, that Moses is not the author of the book of Genesis. In the 36th chapter of Genesis, there is given a genealogy of the sons and descendants of Esau, who are called Edomites, and also a list by name of the kings of Edom, in enumerating of which it is said, verse 31, "And these are the kings that reigned in Edom, before there reigned any king over the children of Israel." Now, were any dateless writings to be found, in which, speaking of any past events, the writer should say, these things happened before there was any Congress in America, or before there was any convention in France, it would be evidence that such writing could not have been written before, and could only be written after there was a Congress in America, or a convention in France, as the case might be, and consequently that it could not be written by any person who died before there was a Congress in the one country or a convention in the other. Nothing is more frequent, as well in history as in conversation, than to refer to a fact in the room of a date. It is most natural so to do, first, because a fact fixes itself in the memory better than a date. Secondly, because the fact includes the date and serves to excite two ideas at once.
I'm going to leave that playing, but I'm going to do a be right back. Because I need a quick bathroom break. So I'm gonna leave this playing, and I shouldn't be gone long. I'm gonna use the restroom and grab a new drink, so maybe 5 minutes or so, but I'll mostly be in earshot to keep listening to this. Again, it amazes me that this was written like 200 years ago. And yeah. Anyway, I will be back shortly. Pyramid Heaven. I could be a real jerk right now, Brad. I could be a jerk if you're gonna try and be a cheater. It's not fair if I don't get a chance to stop the pyramid being built. Let's see. Bam! I wouldn't do that to you. Anyway, I will be right back. I'll be right back. Doo-doo-doo.
And this manner of speaking by circumstances implies as positively that the fact alluded to is past, as if it was so expressed. When a person, speaking upon any matter, says, it was before I was married, or before my son was born, or before I went to America, or before I went to France, it is absolutely understood and intended to be understood that he has been married, that he has had a son, that he has been in America or been in France. Language does not admit of using this mode of expression in any other sense, and whenever such an expression is found anywhere, it can only be understood in the sense in which only it could have been used. The passage, therefore, that I have quoted, that these are the kings that reigned in Edom before there reigned any king over the children of Israel, could only have been written after the first king began to reign over them, and consequently that the book of Genesis, so far from having been written by Moses, could not have been written till the time of Saul at least. This is the positive sense of the passage. But the expression any king implies more kings than one. It implies at least two, and this will carry it to the time of David, and if taken in a general sense, it carries itself through all the times of the Jewish monarchy. Had we met with this verse in any part of the Bible that professed to have been written after kings began to reign in Israel, it would have been impossible not to have seen the application of it. It happens, then, that this is the case. The two books of Chronicles, which gave a history of all the kings of Israel, are professedly, as well as in fact, written after the Jewish monarchy began, and this verse that I have quoted, and all the remaining verses of the 36th chapter of Genesis are, word for word, in the first chapter of Chronicles, beginning at the 43rd verse. And it was with consistency that the writer of the Chronicles could say, as he has said, 1 Chronicles chapter 1 verse 43, "These are the kings that reigned in Edom, before there reigned any king over the children of Israel," because he was going to give, and has given, a list of the kings that had reigned in Israel. But as it is impossible that the same expression could have been used before that period, it is as certain as anything can be proved from historical language that this part of Genesis is taken from Chronicles, and that Genesis is not so old as Chronicles, and probably not so old as the book of Homer, or as Aesop's fables, admitting Homer to have been, as the tables of chronology state, contemporary with David or Solomon, and Aesop to have lived about the end of the Jewish monarchy. Take away from Genesis the belief that Moses was the author, on which only the strange belief that it is the word of God has stood, and there remains nothing of Genesis but an anonymous book of stories, fables, and traditionary or invented absurdities, or of downright lies. The story of Eve and the serpent, and of Noah and his ark, drops to a level with the Arabian tales, without the merit of being entertaining, and the account of men living to 800 and 900 years becomes as fabulous as the immortality of the giants of mythology. Besides, the character of Moses, as stated in the Bible, is the most horrid that can be imagined. If those accounts be true, he was the wretch that first began and carried on wars on the score or on the pretense of religion, and under that mask or that infatuation committed the most unexampled atrocities that are to be found in the history of any nation, of which I will state only one instance. When the Jewish army returned from one of their plundering and murdering excursions, the account goes on as follows. Numbers chapter 31 verse 13. "And Moses and Eleazar the priest, and all the princes of the congregation, went forth to meet them without the camp. And Moses was wrath with the officers of the host, with the captains over thousands and captains over hundreds, which came from the battle. And Moses said unto them, Have ye saved all the women alive? Behold, these caused the children of Israel, through the counsel of Balaam, to commit trespass against the Lord in the matter of Peor. And there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord. Now, therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman that hath known a man by lying with him. But all the women children that have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. End of Part 2, Section 3.
So yeah, Thomas Paine, man. Oh, also, by the way, there are 3 variations of Gnome Getty in the spring store, by the way. By the by. We've got seasoned gratings. There we go. I also put in seasoned greetings. Hope I didn't just delete something I didn't mean to delete. There we go. So yeah, I do have some new stuff in the merch store because that's what you want to hear right after that verse about massacres. Thomas Paine's bringing the information. I think we're in section 4 is the next section. I think. Continuing on. I'm trying to make a decision here. Acrylic has this in digital. Acrylic has this weird opacity thing that happens. And it brightens up a lot if I turn the background white on. And it goes back down when I turn that off because it's a little bit translucent. I kind of like the brightness and I kind of don't. I'm going to leave it on for now. Anyway, let's continue on a bit more. Hopefully I don't miss my face again.
Part 2, Section 4 of The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Among the detestable villains that in any period of the world have disgraced the name of man, it is impossible to find a greater than Moses, if this account be true. Here is an order to butcher the boys, to massacre the mothers, and debauch the daughters. Let any mother put herself in the situation of those mothers, one child murdered, another destined to violation, and herself in the hands of an executioner. Let any daughter put herself in the situation of those daughters, destined as a prey to the murderers of a mother and a brother, and what will be their feelings? It is in vain that we attempt to impose upon nature, for nature will have her course, and the religion that tortures all her social ties is a false religion. After this detestable order follows an account of the plunder taken, and the manner of dividing it. And here it is that the profaneness of priestly hypocrisy increases the catalogue of crimes. Verse 37. And the Lord's tribute of the sheep was 660 and the beehives was 36,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 312. And the asses were 30,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 301. And the persons were 30,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 32. In short, the matters combined in this chapter, as well as in many other parts of the Bible, are too horrid for humanity to read, or for decency to hear. For it appears from the 35th verse of this chapter that the number of women children consigned to debauchery by the order of Moses was 32,000. People in general know not what wickedness there is in this pretended word of God. Brought up in habits of superstition, they take it for granted that the Bible is true, and that it is good. They permit themselves not to doubt of it, and they carry the ideas they form of the benevolence of the Almighty to the book which they have been taught to believe was written by his authority. Good heavens! It is quite another thing. It is a book of lies, wickedness, and blasphemy. For what can be greater blasphemy than to ascribe the wickedness of man to the orders of the Almighty? But to return to my subject, that of showing that Moses is not the author of the books ascribed to him, and that the Bible is spurious. The two instances I have already given would be sufficient, without any additional evidence, to invalidate the authenticity of any book that pretended to be 400 or 500 years more ancient than the matters it speaks of or refers to as facts. For in the case of pursuing them unto Dan, and of the kings that reigned over the children of Israel, not even the flimsy pretense of prophecy can be pleaded. The expressions are in the preter tense, and it would be downright idiotism to say that a man could prophesy in the preter tense. But there are many other passages scattered throughout those books that unite in the same point of evidence. It is said in Exodus, another of the books ascribed to Moses, chapter 16, verse 34, and the children of Israel did eat manna until they came to a land inhabited. They did eat manna until they came unto the borders of the land of Canaan. Whether the children of Israel are manna or not, or what manna was, or whether it was anything more than a kind of fungus or small mushroom, or other vegetable substance common to that part of the country, makes nothing to my argument. All that I mean to show is, that it is not Moses that could write this account, because the account extends itself beyond the life and time of Moses. Moses, according to the Bible, but it is such a book of lies and contradictions, there is no knowing which part to believe, or whether any, dies in the wilderness, and never came upon the borders of the land of Canaan, and consequently it could not be he that said what the children of Israel did, or what they ate when they came there. This account of eating manna, which they tell us was written by Moses, extends itself to the time of Joshua, the successor of Moses, as appears by the account given in the book of Joshua, after the children of Israel had passed the river Jordan, and came unto the borders of the land of Canaan. Joshua chapter 5, verse 12. And the manna ceased on the morrow, after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. But a more remarkable instance than this occurs in Deuteronomy, which, while it shows that Moses could not be the writer of that book, shows also the fabulous notions that prevailed at that time about giants. In the 3rd chapter of Deuteronomy, among the conquests said to be made by Moses, is an account of the taking of Og, king of Bashan. Verse 11, "For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the race of giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbath of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man." A cubit is 1 foot 9,888 1/1000 inches. The length, therefore, of the bed was 16 feet 4 inches, and the breadth 7 feet 4 inches. Thus much for this giant's bed. Now for the historical part, which, though the evidence is not so direct and positive as in the former cases, is nevertheless very presumable and corroborating evidence, and is better than the best evidence on the contrary side. The writer, by way of proving the existence of this giant, refers to his bed as an ancient relic, and says, is it not in Rabbath, or Rabbah, of the children of Ammon? Meaning that it is, for such is frequently the Bible method of affirming a thing. But it could not be Moses that said this, because Moses could know nothing of Rabbah, nor of what was in it. Rabbah was not a city belonging to this giant king, nor was it one of the cities that Moses took. The knowledge, therefore, that this bed was at Rabbah, and of the particulars of its dimensions, must be referred to the time when Rabbah was taken, and this was not till 400 years after the death of Moses, for which we see 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 26, "And Joab, David's general, fought against Rabbah of the children of Ammon, and took the royal city." As I am not undertaking to point out all the contradictions in time, place, and circumstance that abound in the books ascribed to Moses, and which prove to a demonstration that those books could not be written by Moses, nor in the time of Moses, I proceed to the book of Joshua, and to show that Joshua is not the author of that book, and that it is anonymous and without authority. The evidence I shall produce is contained in the book itself. I will not go out of the Bible for proof against the supposed authenticity of the Bible. False testimony is always good against itself. Joshua, according to the 1st chapter of Joshua, was the immediate successor of Moses. He was, moreover, a military man, which Moses was not, and he continued as chief of the people of Israel 25 years. That is, from the time that Moses died, which, according to the Bible chronology, was 1451 years before Christ, until 1426 years before Christ, when, according to the same chronology, Joshua died. If, therefore, we find in this book, said to have been written by Joshua, reference to facts done after the death of Joshua, it is evidence that Joshua could not be the author, and also that the book could not have been written till after the time of the latest fact which it records. As to the character of the book, it is horrid. It is a military history of rapine and murder, as savage and brutal as those recorded of his predecessor in villainy and hypocrisy, Moses, and the blasphemy consists, as in the former books, in ascribing those deeds to the orders of the Almighty. In the first place, the book of Joshua, as is the case in the preceding books, is written in the third person. It is the historian of Joshua that speaks, for it would have been absurd and vainglorious that Joshua should say of himself, as is said of him in the last verse of the 6th chapter, that his fame was noised throughout all the country. I now come more immediately to the proof. In the 24th chapter, verse 31, it is said, that Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders that overlived Joshua. Now, in the name of common sense, can it be Joshua that relates what people had done after he was dead? This account must not only have been written by some historian that lived after Joshua, but that lived also after the elders that outlived Joshua. There are several passages of a general meaning with respect to time scattered throughout the book of Joshua that carries the time in which the book was written to a distance from the time of Joshua, but without marking by exclusion any particular time, as in the passage above quoted. In that passage, the time that intervened between the death of Joshua and the death of the elders is excluded descriptively and absolutely, and the evidence substantiates that the book could not have been written till after the death of the last. But though the passages to which I allude, and which I am going to quote, do not designate any particular time by exclusion, they imply a time far more distant from the days of Joshua than is contained between the death of Joshua and the death of the elders. Such is the passage, chapter 10, verse 14, where, after giving an account that the sun stood still upon Gibeon, and the moon in the valley of Ajalon, at the command of Joshua, a tale only fit to amuse children, the passage says, "And there was no day like that, before it nor after it, that the Lord hearkened to the voice of a man." This tale of the sun standing still upon Mount Gibeon and the moon in the valley of Ajalon is one of those fables that detects itself. Such a circumstance could not have happened without being known all over the world. One half would have wondered why the sun did not rise, and the other why it did not set, and the tradition of it would be universal, whereas there is not a nation in the world that knows anything about it. But why must the moon stand still? What occasion could there be for moonlight in the daytime, and that too whilst the sun shined? As a poetical figure, the whole is well enough. It is akin to that in the song of Deborah and Baruch. The stars in their courses fought against Sisera. But it is inferior to the figurative declaration of Muhammad, to the persons who came to expostulate with him on his goings-on. "Wert thou," said he, "to come to me with the sun in thy right hand and the moon in thy left, it should not alter my career." For Joshua to have exceeded Muhammad, he should have put the sun and moon one in each pocket, and carried them as Gi Fo carried his dark lanthorn, and taken them out to shine as he might happen to want them. End of Part 2, Section 4.
Not sure if I want it to be snowing in here or not. Just trying some stuff out. Kind of partially want to put some lights on the trees. I kind of don't. I don't know. Just playing around with this one. Crap. What were we just on? Let's find out.
Part 2, Section 5 of The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The sublime and the ridiculous are often so nearly related that it is difficult to class them separately. One step above the sublime makes the ridiculous, and one step above the ridiculous makes the sublime again. The account, however, abstracted from the poetical fancy, shows the ignorance of Joshua, for he should have commanded the earth to have stood still. The time implied by the expression after it, that is, after that day, being put in comparison with all the time that passed before it, must, in order to give any expressive signification to the passage, mean a great length of time. For example, it would have been ridiculous to have said to the next day, or the next week, or the next month, or the next year. To give, therefore, meaning to the passage, comparative with the wonder it relates, and the prior time it alludes to, it must mean centuries of years. Less, however, than one would be trifling, and less than two would be barely admissible. A distant but general time is also expressed in the 8th chapter, where, after giving an account of the taking the city of Ai, it is said, verse 28, "And Joshua burned Ai, and made it an heap forever, a desolation unto this day." And again, verse 29, where speaking of the king of Ai, whom Joshua had hanged and buried at the entering of the gate, it is said, "And he raised thereon a great heap of stones, which remaineth unto this day," that is, unto the day or time in which the writer of the book of Joshua lived. And again in the 10th chapter, where, after speaking of the 5 kings whom Joshua had hanged on 5 trees, and then thrown in a cave, it is said, "And he laid great stones on the cave's mouth, which remain unto this very day." In enumerating the several exploits of Joshua, and of the tribes, and of the places which they conquered,
Yeah, I kind of like it. I'm kind of playing around with the background color now. Because I don't know if you can see how much that is changing it. Because the colors on my screen aren't necessarily changing it as much. But again, when I make the background color completely white, this is what it looks like. But then I was messing with, I can really darken it up if I make the background color black. And I can make it more purpley if I make the background color a brighter color. Kind of like playing up these blue tones a little bit. Makes it a little bit darker at night. But yeah, it could maybe be a cute Christmas card. Kind of Christmas, not really. I'm just glad that I finally found a brush that I think better simulates what's known as dry brush. So dry brush isn't really like you're just working with a dry brush, but it is where you are working with very little paint on the brush. Yeah, I kind of like this blue underneath. Where you're working with very little paint on the brush, and I think I finally found a digital brush that simulates that for me. Because the one that's called dry brush doesn't act like a dry brush, in my opinion. Like, not like an actual real dry brush technique. But I found one called Old Brush, and the Old Brush gives me more of the dry brush technique to like make those trees happen. Excuse me. Yeah, I kind of like it with those blue undertones a little bit. Anywho, I think I'm gonna leave this alone. I don't know that the spring store allows cards. But as I said, as I showed earlier, I do have Gnome Getty in there now. Doo-doo-doo. Um, so Seasoned Greetings is in there. Seasoned Greetings is in there. Talk About Christmas is in there. And Heathen's Greetings, the Pastafarian Snowman is also in there. So if you're interested, I got that stuff in there. I also made some of these into a sticker. The profit margins are really low, and I also don't know why, but the sticker like changed his eyes to gray. But it looks kind of cool. And I don't get it because the eyes kept the normal color on the rest of stuff. So I don't know. But yeah, all the stuff is in there. There's more than that. That's just like the stuff at the beginning. I do have 12% off happening right now if you need some Christmassy things. And then, of course, I also have the coloring book if you want to grab that on Amazon available. Or you can hang out here a lot and wait till you get to like 75,000 points, and then I will send you one. Anyway, though, please hang out for a few more moments so we can do a raid. But hopefully you've enjoyed the random trying to do acrylic painting as digital stuff. Let's see who's online to raid. Less than halfway to the coloring book. Yeah, I made the coloring book high on purpose because it cost me money to send that one. It cost me money to send that one, so I'll see if I can get this onto cards or at least like into the spring store. Yeah, I kind of like how it came out. It's kind of cool. I like it. I like it. I like it. Still not quite like what I can do with acrylic, but I'm getting closer. Like, I know that might not look great, but like this one little snowbank in the back, I felt like under the bridge here was like way closer to normal acrylicing. This is actually based, let me show you real fast. This is based off of, 36 for next Christmas. And of course you redeemed Mad Libs. Okay, let me show you what this is based off of really quick though. So this is going off of a painting I taught in the art classes. Let me show you the acrylic version. It's not going to let me zoom in, is it? So this is the acrylic version. So a lot of that snow texture was a lot easier, and I wish it would let me zoom. It will if I do this. Haha. We'll pull this up a different way. And then we'll get to the Mad Libs real quick before we call it a night. that's gonna go back in time. You know what I want for Christmas? I need some more digital storage. I'm not even kidding. Google's yelling at me that I need more digital storage. So I gotta buy some more storage so my iPad starts backing up and everything. I can't find it at that small. But I really want you guys to see the painting. There we go. Can I not zoom in on here either? Okay. So, yeah, with the painting, I'm able to be a little bit messier, but also, like, I can lay things down a lot quicker with the painting and get more of the look I'm going for more quickly. So yeah, this was the little painting that tonight in last streams was made of. All right, let's do a quick Mad Libs before we call it a day. But yeah, I'll see if I can at least get this one up for print. Maybe I'll consider it for Christmas card, holiday card run. All right, give me a second. Let's pull up the Mad Libs. Let me also write down real quick part 2, section 5. Okay. Mad Libs. Okay, so this is tangential because this relates to OA's stream. Let me copy, add a browser. Okay. Okay. I can also totally randomize
A
this.
few moments later.
Mikey, Hellbound just we just finished this lovely little snowy painting, and we've been listening to Thomas Paine's Edge of Reason, and Mad Libs has been redeemed. However, you guys can't see the name of it, and you can't see all of the things. So start typing stuff in chat, and I will fill it in, and then we will read this Mad Lib. And yes, last time we got Edging Swans. Oh my god, you guys. I guess that's a noun? Oh my gosh. Wait, you guys can't see this live. Why is that not working? Hold on. Let me remove that. Let me do it as a screen cap. Do it as a window capture. Okay, there we go. Now you can see it. Okay. All right. I'm going to get caught up. I'm going to plug the things in. You weirdos. Okay, hold on. Cornfield. I'm putting that in for funny word. Ah, you people. Putting that in is a funny word too. No. The swan is not making it in here. Hammers. Bag of hammers. Bags of hammers. Adjective. Hammered. Wives. Oh my. I need a number. 42, the only acceptable number. Very good. 42. We still need a verb, a male name, several adjectives, several more nouns, a place, verbs ending in ed. Keep going. Oh, Brad, I don't know if you're going to like this or not. Flipped. I'm going to be fancy. Fornicated. Sticky. You heathens. All right, we still got a few more to go. We're getting this list filled up, but we got a few more to go. We got adjective, noun, verbs ending with ed. Dusty, I like it. Place. More nouns and adjectives. Keep going. A jug. We need two more verbs ending in 3D. We need two more verbs ending in 3D. Master. You put a verb ending in ed in a regular verb? I did? Where? No, I didn't. I put fornicated. Oh, you're right. Up here, slipped. All right, we'll move that down there. I'm gonna change this. Nope, that's not a verb. Replied. We need nouns and a place. My gosh. Pickle. Put trip in up here. We've got one noun, one adjective, and one place. Mars for the place. I like it. We already got Uranus in here. Now we need an adjective and a noun, and then we can do this tangentially related to OA's was it her last stream? Her stream before last. Those of you that were in OA's stream like 2 nights ago will get why I chose this particular Mad Lib. Acorn. All right. And finally, the final adjective. Dirty, like us dirty heathens. All right, are you ready? Are you ready? Let's see what happens. This is called Hakuna Matata, the Lion King ad lib. Because these are called ad libs, not mad libs, because mad libs isn't a copyright, I guess. Okay, anyway, whether you're ready or not, here we go. Oh my god. Okay. Cornfield Uranus. What a moist phrase. Cornfield Uranus. Ain't no passing craze. It means no bags of hammers for the rest of your wives. I hope you're not giving bags of hammers for your wives. It's our hammered philosophy. Cornfield Uranus. Cornfield Uranus. Yeah, it's our boner. What's a boner? Nothing. What's a boner with you? Those 42 words will trip all your problems. That's right. Take Brad here. Why, when he was a sticky grapefruit, when I was a sticky grapefruit, very dusty, thanks. He found his jug slipped a certain appeal, and he could clear the Mars after every master. I'm a green soul, though I seem dirty, and it fornicated that my pickle never stood downwind. And oh, the shame! He was ashamed. The thought of changing my acorn. What's in an acorn? And I got replied, how do you feel? Every time that hey Brad, not in front of the heathens. Oh, sorry. Cornfield Uranus. What a moist phrase. Cornfield Uranus ain't no passing craze. It means no bags of hammers for the rest of your wives. It's our hammered philosophy. Cornfield Uranus. Cornfield Uranus. Cornfield Uranus. It means no bags of hammers for the rest of your wives. It's our hammered philosophy. Cornfield Uranus. Oh my god. Also, Brad, just so you know, the printer-friendly version is just a blank version where it like has the top part where you can put in the nouns and verbs and adjectives and stuff and the story below. But yes, I can copy. I can copy and paste this into a document and share it with you. What I can't do is make it through this without laughing. Oh my gosh, you heathens. But yeah, if you were in OA's stream a little while ago, you'll get why that was topical. That was one of the best ones. My face hurts a little bit right now. That was too funny. Okay. All right. Mikey's already streaming, and Mikey was in here giving answers. Ours doesn't quite violate TMS or copyright law. I certainly hope not. Okay. All right. 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 Whew. Please stay for a second. I understand if you don't stay where we raid to. However, I like to send raids to the people who have the least viewers. They might be also streaming to YouTube and have more viewers there. But Mikey was just in here showing some love, contributing, lurking. So we're gonna raid over to Mikey. It is a politically themed show. If that's not your thing, please just stay for the raid and then you can dip out quietly. But it does help this channel when you stay for the raid and you get extra points for this channel. I will email, I'm pretty sure I still have your email. I will email the transcript to you, Brad, of our hammered philosophy. Let me get the rank message in there. Is that the thing? I don't even remember. My brain's a little broken. That was hilarious. Copy the raid message if you want to. Don't if you don't want to. Thanks so much, everyone that was hanging out with me. If you copy the raid message, add whatever emotes you want to add. Let me mute this here. All right, we're gonna raid over to Mikey's. I don't think it's exactly leftist late night, but leftist late night. Like I said, if it's not your thing, please just stay and support this channel by staying for the raid. And thanks so much, everyone. I will see you on Friday. Oh, one last final quick thing. One quick thing. If you draw, or if you want to submit a photo, next Friday, we're going to do an ugly sweater party here on Twitch. So you can send it to me directly, or you can tag me on Instagram. But if you want to do a character, drawing a character based on an ugly sweater, you want to submit music based on an ugly sweater, what that would sound like, I don't know. But we're gonna do an ugly sweater art showcase next week. All right, lovely people. Much love. See you around the Twitch lands, internet lands soon. Thank you for the laughs. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you on Friday. Bye, everyone.